I'm Teisha Bader. Thank you for joining me. Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Jerusalem, is the premier source for Holocaust education, documentation, and research. It is tasked with preserving the memory of the Holocaust and educating the world about the Shoah and anti-Semitism. And with the number of Holocaust survivors dwindling, it is more important than ever to do just that, preserve memory. Preserve their memory, our history, so that future generations never forget. Well, a new campus housing a massive collection of documents, photographs, artifacts, art, and more from the Shoah is opening at Yad Vashem to ensure that mission. The new Moshal Shoah Legacy Campus, with the David and Fela Chappelle Family Collection Center at its heart, located on the Mount of Remembrance in Jerusalem, houses over 230 million Holocaust-era items in what Yad Vashem calls a solemn repository of human resilience. And we are so honored, as always, to have with us in our Times Square studio in New York City, the chairman of Yad Vashem, Dani Dayan. Dani, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me again.
It's always an honor, and it's always so special. So tell us about this new center at Yad Vashem, and what do you hope will be the experience for people who visit there, and ultimately, how will it help in your mission?
Well, first of all, is in order to preserve for the future generations, for infinity actually, the artifacts, the documents, the books, the photographs, the films that we have, an integral part, an essential part of the Jewish history, the tragic Jewish history of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. They are also a tool to educate, unfortunately, but also inevitably, we know that in a number of years, I hope many years, but we will live in a world devoid of actual witnesses of the Holocaust. When that happens, the artifacts, the documents, the photographs will be the witnesses. So we have to make an effort, first of all, to collect them, and second, to preserve them. In the new collection center, in the Chappelle Collection Center, amidst the Moshal Legacy Campus, we have state-of-the-art ways in order to preserve that for eternity. Optimal temperature, optimal humidity, reduce oxygen to prevent fires. God forbid a fire in the collection center of Yad Vashem could be a tragedy. So it's an amazing also engineering project, 5 stories underground. In which, as I said, what I call the jewels of the crown of the Jewish people will be preserved forever, and the people will have access, limited access for preservation reasons, but there will also be access in order to see some of the artifacts and documents that we have there.
And the complex also will have an auditorium and a video wall. Tell us about those other...
Yes, there is a video wall, an artistic endeavor, an artistic project by the Israeli artist Ran Slavin that encapsulates in a video presentation the wealth of the treasures that we have, the treasures of the Jewish people that we have collected. And also, as you said, an auditorium for events and other presentations. But I think that the importance, it's a very beautiful place. We were very honored that together with the Moshal and Chappelle families, President Isaac Herzog will inaugurate it in a few weeks. But the most important thing are the artifacts themselves, the documents themselves, that really encapsulate the history of the Jewish people in that those tragic days, and they serve us in order also to not only first to educate, and B, Teisha, one of the most important things that Yad Vashem does is to give back a persona, a human figure to the Jews, the 6 million Jews that the Nazis tried to annihilate without leaving any trace. That's the reason also that we inaugurated a few months ago the Book of Names with almost 5 million individual names of victims of the Shoah. We are guided by a quote by a a Jewish Dutch lawyer, a survivor himself, Abel Herzberg, a survivor of Bergen-Belsen, that he said the Shoah is not an assassination of 6 million Jews. It's actually 6 million assassinations of one Jew each. Each one of those victims was a person, was an individual, was a Jewish individual. And we have the obligation to give them back their dignity, their Jewishness, their faith, their history, the things that belong to them, and that is exactly what we do.
And you're talking about these artifacts, whether it be a photograph, a document, a piece of jewelry, a piece of clothing. As you said, each one is a world, is one person's world with, meaning for their family.
Right, because that's the reason we always link artifacts to the persons that they belong to them and to the story of the artifact. It is very important. The artifact itself probably is less important. What we do is to create a puzzle. We create a picture of the person that was behind the story of that artifact. And indeed, we have amazing stories that are linked to different, for instance, a shoe of a baby. It belonged to Hinda Cohen. She was assassinated by the Nazis, taken when their parents were in forced labor during the morning, and the father, with a knife, put the date of her disappearance and kept it the entire war, the entire Shoah. So the shoe is, of course, an important document itself, but when you build the whole story, then it's also an educating tool.
Absolutely. In fact, Justin Pines, who's our CEO at JBS, has a really incredible story that he was able to, it was really a mystery that was able to be revealed and discovered because of the work of Yad Vashem, and we actually have a clip about it. We'll take a look.
We named our fourth child Kayla Chaya after Chaya Holtzberg, and we feel very fortunate that we were able to discover this story about our family and our heritage.
Let me tell you a little bit about my father, because that basically will explain a little bit, I think, the background of this whole story. My father was a very quiet man. He didn't tell me anything about the Holocaust. They didn't want to talk about it. We didn't want to necessarily ask too many questions. When I was about 10, 12 years old, my father bought himself a gold watch. When my father passed away, my mother gave me the watch. When I opened it, there was a small warranty booklet inside the case.
And as we open up the folds of this warranty, something falls down. It flutters to the ground, so I bent down to pick it up, and it's a postage stamp picture of two women.
I was absolutely shocked. I have never seen this photograph before. I showed it to my mother. She wasn't sure what it was. I showed it to some of my relatives. Again, couldn't really get information about it, but it seemed clear to me that my father wanted me to have this photograph. I then found out that Yad Vashem has uploaded the database with the memorial documents. And I decided, well, let me take a look. Maybe I'll find something about my father. So I put in my father's name, and I found two documents, which absolutely shocked me. The first one is with my father's handwriting. And basically, he documents there the fact that he had a wife and two children. And in addition to the name Chaya Goldberg, I found in parentheses her maiden name, Holtzberg. And at that point, I remembered that my father had relatives by the name of Holtzberg. Perhaps I will know who she was.
And we got in touch with the Holtzbergs, who Tzachi had found out was living in Queens. We invited them to our house. We had a family meal. We had all of our children there, all of our grandchildren.
This is the watch that he left for me, right? And inside the watch was this picture. No.
And he says, yes, of course. This is my sister. She was married to your father. And we said, wow.
And then he gave us some additional information about their lives. They had 2 daughters. One of them was about 6 or 7 years old, and the other one was a newborn. And they were apparently hiding when the Germans came in. And obviously they were very worried about the baby crying, and somebody covered her mouth. And after the Germans left, they realized the baby died. The mother, with her own bare hands, dug a grave for her newborn baby and buried her in an unmarked grave. A couple of months later, my father was taken to a labor camp, and Chaya Goldberg and her daughter were gassed in Majdanek. The work that Yad Vashem does in maintaining this database, making it available. I mean, look, I would have never found out about that part of my family history. And it's such an important component of what we are. What Yad Vashem is doing is absolutely critical to the history of our people, to the future of our people.
And when you come to a place like Yad Vashem and you encounter the artifacts and the archives and these stories and these untold stories, there's so many more stories. It's an opportunity to really understand more. And as we understand more about our past, we understand more about our future, what our role is, how we must live our lives in light of what has happened.
I asked my father, when she was born, I told him, I'm going to name this child after Chaya Holtzberg. In true fashion, my father said, you do what you need to do. But I know that when I named her Chaya, he was very, very thankful.
That's an incredible story.
An incredible story.
Yeah.
It's a very moving story. I must say it's not unique. We have many stories of this kind in which artifacts and documents and photographs helped families and help us give the families knowledge about the whereabouts of their families. In this case, even family members they didn't know about,
right.
Which is quite an amazing thing.
And then it impacts generations to come. We had a child named for this woman who no one knew about.
Exactly.
And that then, has repercussions.
Exactly.
In the future
Look,
of our people.
Teisha, as you said aptly, Yad Vashem is not only about the past, it's basically about the present and the future of the Jewish people.
And you talk about resilience. The resilience of Holocaust survivors is incredible. And we talk about resilience these days. Since what happened on October the 7th, the resilience of the Jewish people, the resilience of the people of Israel is just astounding. And it's, the tragic, the daily news from Israel is so difficult. The loss of IDF soldiers is so difficult. The loss of hostages, or the so many hostages that we don't know what their fate is gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. The silver lining, if we can call it that, or the other side of the coin, is that incredible resilience and the unity that we're seeing in Israel and really here in the United States and across the world, I would say, of the Jewish people.
Indeed, and it's not only about that, it's also about the communities that were devastated. It's quite interesting what happened. Every year after Yom HaShoah, after the Holocaust Memorial Day, that is usually in April or May according to the Jewish calendar, we choose the annual theme for the following year. So in May 2023, long before October 7th, we choose the Jewish community that vanished as the annual theme for this year. And then came October 7th, with all the differences. And October 7th is not a continuation of the Shoah. We can talk about it if you like. But all the difference, again, as you said, the importance and the resilience of the Jewish community in modern times now in Israel, in southern Israel, in northern Israel, became a relevant topic again. We didn't have no idea, of course, when we choose that as the annual theme of Shoah remembrance, of Holocaust remembrance, that that will happen. But everything is connected. You know, it reminds me that when President Biden came to Yad Vashem in June or July 22, I had basically more or less a minute to be with him alone on the way from his motorcade to the Hall of Remembrance, where President Herzog and then Prime Minister Lapid were waiting for the president. And I told him, you know, Mr. President, Israel was not created because of the Shoah. Israel was created in spite of the Shoah. But it's impossible to understand Israel and understand Israelis without understanding the impact that the Shoah has to this very day on all of us, in each one of us. And that was very clear on October 7th, because in spite of all the differences, and there are huge differences between the Shoah and October 7th, I think that there are certain themes that came to our mind immediately. The community, the Jewish community, the fate of the Jewish community, the cruelty. When we heard the stories about mothers muffling the mouth of their children, as did this mother in the clip that we saw, in order not to be discovered by the assailants, then I think that everybody, every Israeli, every Jew was reminded of those dark days of the Shoah, the stories that we heard like this one.
Absolutely.
And again, I say, and it's important for me to say that with all the difference that exists between the Shoah and October 7th.
There are echoes. There are echoes
There are
of
echoes,
it. There was
exactly. There are echoes, there are reflections.
Yeah. And
in spite
parallels,
of the
you
fact
know.
that, of course,
Yeah.
in October 7th, eventually the IDF arrived, and we are not at the mercy of the others as we were during the Shoah. It's not that the most we can do is to lobby President Roosevelt or Prime Minister Churchill to unsuccessfully to bomb the railways conducting to Auschwitz, but we take care of our enemies.
How would you say the feeling is these days in Israel, just with so much unknown, and it's hard to see an end, if we can call it that, in sight, and what's going to be, and the fate of the hostages, and the daily war in Gaza?
Yeah, indeed, we are experiencing. I live in Israel for more than 50 years. I remember I was already in Israel during the Yom Kippur War, but I think that we are living the most difficult days, the most worrying days in Israel's history. I must also say that we pray for the fate of our colleague, Dr. Alex Danzig, an historian linked to Yad Vashem for more than 30 years, a man in his 70s, that is also one of the 120 Hamas hostages. We have no news lately regarding his, of course, his whereabouts, but also his fate.
Yeah.
We pray that he's doing well. We know that at least at the early stages of his captivity, we know that from those that were released in the past, that he even gave history lessons in captivity.
That's amazing.
Fortunately, one of our guides, Liat Atzili, a guide in our museum that was also captive, taken hostage by Hamas, was released. But the day she was released, she received the news that her husband, Aviv, was murdered.
I'm so sorry. And you know, Israel is such a small country, as you know, that if you don't know someone who's a hostage, then you know someone who knows someone. And if you don't know someone who's serving in the IDF,
Exactly.
it's so small. And even Jews here, I think we all are connected to somebody. And even if we weren't, we feel the connection. And it's
Exactly.
our brothers
Actually,
and sisters.
Since I came to New York, I couldn't participate. I couldn't pay a visit to the Shiva of a friend, Oren Smadja, a former judo Israeli medalist, himself a judoka, a bronze medal judoka from the Barcelona 1992 Olympic Games, whose son Omer was killed in action.
Yes. It's tragic. As we speak about, again, it's not making a comparison, but a person, as it says in Judaism, is olam imlo'o, is a world unto itself, and each person
Yeah.
It's just a tragic
Indeed.
loss.
Indeed.
You also were able to go to Pittsburgh for the groundbreaking ceremony, talking about, again, resilience and strength in the face of tragedy. October 2018 was the worst anti-Semitic attack on U.S. soil, was the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and you were at the time Consul General in New York. You went to Pittsburgh right away, and now only almost 6 years later, you made it was important to you to be there for the groundbreaking.
For me, it was very personal. I actually, when on October 27, 2018, when that horrible shooting took place, I was, from all places, in Phoenix, Arizona, in a JNF National Conference. And because of the time difference, I started very early in the morning to receive reports about something happening in Pittsburgh. And I knew that that's the place where I should be. We made some security arrangements and, of course, flight arrangements. I arrived to Pittsburgh, to Tree of Life Synagogue, when the bodies were still lying on the ground of the shul, of the Tree of Life Synagogue. With outside there were FBI agents and Chevra Kadisha waiting to enter the scene to take care of the 11 Jewish bodies in a respectful way. I stayed in Pittsburgh for the entire week. I participated on the funerals, all the shivas. We brought to Pittsburgh from Israel members of the Israeli Trauma Coalition that are experts on collective trauma. And I became extremely linked, extremely bonded sentimentally to the Jewish community in Pittsburgh, which, in my view, is one of the most closely knit and really wonderful Jewish communities in this country. Also, I must say that the community at large, in the civil society in Pittsburgh, showed a remarkable support from the then mayor Bill Peduto and down. So for me, when the people in Pittsburgh, of the Jewish community in Pittsburgh, Rabbi Jeffrey Myers and others, were gracious enough to invite me to participate in the groundbreaking ceremony for the new museum that will be established there. Museum, by the way, about anti-Semitism in America, in the United States. I knew that, again, I wanted to be there. That's the place in which I should be, and I was very honored to participate in the groundbreaking. Also, incidentally, the architect that was chosen to design the new building is a good friend of mine from my days in New York, Daniel Libeskin.
Oh, of course. He's so highly regarded. Yes.
Course.
Wow. Yeah, I was watching the ceremony, and they blew the 3 different shofars, and this is what we do, right? We survive, and we find a way to go forward.
Yeah, I think that the words of what you call in America the second gentleman, that was the keynote speaker in the event, were also very important, including his remark that some of the statements that against the state of Israel are examples of anti-Semitism and not just anti-Zionism. In that respect, although it could be seen as an intervention in American domestic issues, I would like to add that I believe it's about time that the White House nominates a czar of a fight against anti-Semitism. The situation in this country has deteriorated so much. Of course, there is the outstanding special envoy, Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, but she's part of the State Department, meaning that she's in charge of fighting anti-Semitism outside the United States. But we all know that this country also has today a problem of anti-Semitism, domestic anti-Semitism, that should be taken care of immediately.
I hear you, and it truly has been a very difficult time here. It really feels like the world is upside down with what is right and what is wrong. And so much of what we're seeing here in the United States is truly shocking, and it's happening quite frequently.
And it's not exclusively in the campuses. It's much more. We saw it happen in Los Angeles. We saw what happened in the subway in New York and in other places. And yes, in the campuses, especially, you know that I know quite intimately the institutions of higher education here in this country, especially in the East Coast, the Ivy League institutions. Have spoken in most of them, and have a daughter that was for 5 years very active in pro-Israel advocacy here in Columbia University. And I must say that what I saw in the last months is a deterioration, an exponential deterioration of the situation that, and unfortunately I don't see college administrators taking a moral stand. They say in some cases they take disciplinary measures. But disciplinary measures in this case are not what is needed. What is needed is a moral stand that says the cause for the elimination of the state of Israel are bigotry and are outside the legitimate discourse, like racism, like xenophobia, like misogyny, like homophobia. This is a kind of bigotry that should not be permitted in the civilized discourse in the academy. Unfortunately, right now, not only that it is considered legitimate, it is being mainstreamed.
It is difficult times in Israel, beyond, for the Jewish world, for the people of Israel. And your voice is always so appreciated. Even in these tough times, we try and, grab these moments that we do see Jewish unity growing, we do see resilience and this beautiful new complex at Yad Vashem, just another way that we are preserving our history and making sure that the dangers of anti-Semitism are well documented, well preserved for generations to come.
Indeed.
And I hope next time you come, Dani, we have good news to share.
Bezrat Hashem.
Bezrat Hashem, Am Yisrael Chai, and always an honor to have you here.
We are indeed a resilient people, and we have gone through tragedies, but here we are. We have now our independent state, and that will stay forever.
Amen. Dani Dayan is chairman of Yad Vashem. We thank him so much for joining us here on JBS.